Hello, my name is Erin Lee,
And my name is Hannah Wing.
and thank you for taking the time to listen to our presentation today. We will cover a variety of aspects that have brought our entire project together, from the hypothesis and the background information to all the results and interesting facts that were discovered along the way.
Our abstract was kind of like a general summary as to what our study was going to be about, which was how nurture affects longevity, so how long someone lives for. And through that, we looked at kind of the effect that culture has on this, and specifically two different monocultures, Japan and India. And then as for our introduction, we kind of introduce what longevity is defined, what nature versus nurture is. So nature being the biological aspects and nurture being the environmental things that influence how a person turns out. Facts, numbers, so like statistics, as well as their impact, which is what led us to create our hypothesis. And our hypothesis is that although genetics do influence longevity, culture is the dominant factor when comparing the populations of Japan and India. These cultural factors include disease controls, water issues, nutrition, healthcare, and medical education.
So, as to why we chose specifically Japan and India, it's because historically they have many similarities in their patterns. For example, diseases, they've had many experiences with the same diseases. So, it's really interesting to see the differences and the similarities. In terms of the factors, we decided to kind of locate them and sort them down based on the specific human needs, which is food, water, shelter, clothing, health, and safety. Oops. Our results, these were the research charts that we did, and they range from diseases. Of course, we used accredited sources for this study. We also targeted water issues. There's healthcare. Here is nutrition, medical education, and we also included some visuals. We have graphs and a diagram. So those were our data charts. Now, in terms of the results and our analysis. So for diseases, although both have a history with zoonotic diseases, the responses and the reactions were different. Because Japan had more restrictions and more strict alternatives, their longevity rates continued to increase, whereas India, unfortunately, continued to decrease. And next, for water issues, overall, water, if it's unavailable, then life ends. Japan has more accessibility to water as well as less issues. For example, microplastics. India, although they do have a lot of water sources, they have more underlying issues that still have not been resolved.
And then the next factor that we looked at was healthcare, specifically kind of what each country was going through. So for Japan, we specifically talked about how kind of after World War II, they went through a lot of economic growth as a country, which led to them rebuilding a lot of their systems, their healthcare system, pharmaceutical system, universal health insurance, and kind of how in terms of healthcare in India, there still is a lot of work that still has to be done. And the importance of healthcare and how accessible it is, whether it be by physical, so like actually being able to access things like locations and being able to get there, or by financial means, so healthcare being affordable. And then for nutrition, we kind of looked at problems from the past and problems that are still persisting today, specifically noting like kind of the improvements that like Japan has gone through after there was a lot of issues concerning malnutrition also after the Second World War, but kind of how in India malnutrition still is an ongoing crisis, and it has been for a very long time, and also how it affects a lot of different demographics, specifically kids, adolescent girls, and pregnant women.
Lastly was medical education. Overall, India does have more medical schools than Japan, but because of the sudden increase, this actually created more problems. Additionally, Japan has more opportunities for medical graduates, whereas India still has no solution to this. So that is the main difference that affects longevity.
And so in the end, we did discover that our hypothesis was true, that nurture does affect longevity more so than nature does, specifically looking at both Japan and India, and kind of just the importance of having all of these different environmental factors and how important it is to have these systems and these structures that are created in a way that they can help as many people as possible, and kind of how there's still a lot of room for improvement in honestly both countries. And specifically looking at, for example, where there is a lack of certain things, kind of how that affects it, and the connection of the basic human needs and these environmental factors. And we kind of use this analogy of kind of like a puzzle piece, and kind of how if you're missing one, it affects the whole picture.
These are our final remarks and acknowledgements, and thank you for listening to our presentation.